Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Welcome again to another episode on Talk Architecture Podcast with your host, Naziaty Muhammad Yaacob. And the topic for today is the Sustainability Development Goals 2030. In particular, the issue with regard to the world for persons with disabilities and how persons with disabilities or disabled persons are included in not one, two, or three of the goals, but 17 goals. So I put down there the link to this discussion, which is hashtag Envision 2030, semicolon, 17 goals to transform the world for persons with disabilities. So this is linked to the United Nations website on social inclusion, Department of Economic and Social Affairs. So why am I interested in this topic is because I was invited to give a keynote speech on this soon for a Malaysian regional development area under the Ministry of Economy. And yes, I need to find points for my speech, but hopefully it's not going to be dry like this podcast. I'm just giving a warning that I am going to quote some of these things and give my thoughts with regard to this topic. So in September 2015, the General Assembly by the United Nations adopted the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development that includes 17 Sustainable Development Goals. We're all been very familiar about it. And architects, planners, those in the built environment, and the professionals involved have talked about this a lot in LinkedIn and social media and so on. Here it says that building on the principle of leaving no one behind, the new agenda emphasizes a holistic approach to achieving sustainable development for all. The SDGs also explicitly include disability and person with disabilities 11 times. Disability is referenced in multiple parts of the SDGs, specifically in the parts related to education, growth, and employment, inequality, accessibility of human settlements, as well as data collection and monitoring of the SDGs. So, of course, rightly so, United Nations is interested to actually discuss on the mainstreaming of person with disabilities into the development on sustainability. So here it says, although the word disability is not cited directly in all goals, the goals are indeed relevant to ensure the inclusion and development of persons with disabilities. The 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development holds a deep promise for persons with disabilities everywhere. The year 2016 marks the first year of the implementation of the SDGs. At this critical point, hashtag Envision 2030 will work to promote the mainstreaming of disability and the implementation of the SDGs throughout its 15-year lifespan with objectives to 1. Raise awareness of the 2030 Agenda and achievement of the SDGs for persons with disabilities. 2. Promote an active dialogue among stakeholders on the SDGs with a view to create a better world for persons with disabilities. And 3. Establish an ongoing live web resource on each SDG and disability. Therefore, that's the basis of the discussion today on what are the SDGs and how is it related to persons with disabilities from my points of view. Number 1, no poverty. As we know it, poverty is intertwined or interlinked very closely with disabilities. When you're poor, you have lack of access to healthcare and the facilities and there are costs involved with different diseases and the need to actually get treatment. Yeah. And therefore, because of this lack of access and lack of going to the hospital, problems going to the hospital, having a carer, a support system, and so on, makes a person who is already ill or having an impairment becoming more disabled. There are more challenges for that person to go about in his or her life. So therefore, no poverty, the first SDG goal, is very much a disability issue. Number 2, zero hunger. When we talk about zero hunger, we talk about food security, how people could have access to food. Accessibility is the binding theme for everything. It is the one that talks about support system, infrastructure, and the framework for getting access to all sorts of support systems. So that is true to food security as well. If I were to grow my own vegetables and I don't have access to land or access to equipment or access to space, then very much I would go hungry. And there could be many other factors, of course. When we talk about zero hunger, it could be famine, or it could be war, or some catastrophe that has happened to villages or to groups of people and so on. But in general, in a normal situation or in an urban situation, we are subjected to nutritious food if we can grow them, if we can access them. Never mind non-nutritious food. Okay, so what we want in zero hunger is that we have access to food that will help us free from disease as well. Number 3, the good health and well-being. Now, good health and well-being is more critical for an older person or person who is approaching an age where they're getting frail and there are more health problems. So in an urban area, for older persons, if they could have access in terms of transportation, support systems, where it is not that expensive to get people to assist them to go to hospital visits, and that they're knowledgeable and information is readily available. And of course, the clinics could be nearer to the community rather than too far away, such as mobile clinics and so on, then there is more chances for persons with disabilities to have good health and well-being. Another issue is also the urban situation where you don't have access to recreational facilities. You don't have access to open space or green or nature, and able to be with other people and socially interact. So health is to do with mental health as well, and the psychosocial environment. Then number 4, quality education. Malaysia had a policy called Zero Reject Policy. I'll be talking about my point of view from my country, obviously. And it is not that easy, actually, if you don't have the infrastructure to get any children into school. And we're not only talking about quality education in which the skills and knowledge that children will acquire will help them in their to get a job, unemployment later on. But we're talking about just getting into basic education as well for persons with disabilities. Number 5, gender equality. So women and girls with disabilities have their own issues in which they need to overcome. compared to men with disabilities or boys with disabilities. So those are to do with social and cultural barriers. An attitudinal barrier that is based on outdated or unhelpful understanding of the human being. So therefore, gender equality is so much something that is very serious in terms of what is happening in many countries and developed countries to that. Number 6, clean water and sanitation. For countries that have problems with getting water to be clean and also to have proper sanitation infrastructure. So we have the problems of implementation or the community playing a part to assist people. And much of the people who are not getting them are persons with disabilities and older persons, because of it needs maybe in certain countries a certain amount of strength to get water and to access sanitation. And we have enough information out there on social media to understand the problems that many of these people face. Number 7, what is that? Affordable and clean energy. I think that's what it says, affordable and clean energy. So now that is, when we talk about energy, we talk about policies and we talk about infrastructure and how these things could reach the masses. And affordability or costs, it is an issue with persons with disabilities because the problem is in terms of a cost. Everything is costlier when you're a disabled person in terms of transportation, in terms of housing. It's just those things that may be taken for granted is additional for persons with disabilities. If the transportation or the issues of getting to these energy and clean energy is important, of course. This is kind of premium in many countries. So if there are extra costs to this, then that's the problem. So hence affordability. Number 8, decent work and economic growth. A lot of students with disabilities who graduate have problems with getting employment and the right sort of employment that actually have reasonable adjustments and could make it much more easier for persons with disabilities to be at par with the rest of their office colleagues. So disabled persons could be anything from mental disability, intellectual disability, to physical and sensory disabilities. So what we're trying to say here is that decent work that is commensurating with the qualifications that the person with disabilities have is necessary to also prove on equality for persons with disabilities. And disabled persons need to be looked at as people who can contribute to the economic growth as well. So there need to be policies and practices from employers to be much more empathizing to persons with disabilities. Number 9, industry, innovation, and infrastructure. Industry, innovation, and infrastructure, whatever technology that is being developed, need to include the needs of persons with disabilities. Number 10, reduce inequalities. That's very general, as I mentioned a lot, in education and employment, in recreation, in housing that I mentioned just now. So this in general is for gender equality just now as well, and definitely for elder persons and persons with disabilities. Number 11, sustainable cities and communities. Identifying with certain groups of people and being able to be part of the community without discrimination, and being able to get support in order to thrive and to develop oneself. For example, independent living concepts could be introduced in it. As I said, independent living concepts is a concept that look into persons with disabilities and elderly persons to be able to have less costs because of the infrastructure is well done, so that that they can do their everyday life easily. In some communities, they even employed persons with disabilities and elderly persons as part of the community, employing them in like restaurants, cafes. And this is giving more visibility to understand or appreciate persons with disabilities. So it's a whole policy to do with the cities and how cities could create communities that are much more empathetic and able to be a self-sustaining support system. That is one of the goals. Number 11. Number 12, responsible consumption and production. This is to do with zero waste concepts or implementation. And it is at the local level, actually. It will save a lot of money for the local government as well when the citizens or the population are being responsible for consumption and production, and also reusing, recycling, and having, being prudent in a sense to not overspend, and also growing their own food and so on. So this is very much part of the locality or neighborhoods and communities, and such ideas such as zero waste or recycling, and even low carbon mobility, to go for cycling and a better pedestrian connectivity, will really help the community to have used less of oil and gas and stuff like that, and public transportation usage rather than using single person vehicles or occupancies. So the 13 is climate action. Definitely, persons with disabilities and older persons are involved in a lot of these activities. Similar to number 12, as I mentioned just now, in terms of helping with lowering the green gases or the emission of certain gases to make our ozone layer thinner. And this has been happening, and we don't have much more time but to do this immediately. Number 14, life below water. Fishes and marine life below water is part of the ecosystem and necessary for us to appreciate. And persons with disabilities are not excluded or are part of this endeavor for life below water goals. Life on land, definitely life on land, and nature preservation, and the monitoring and conservation and preservation of nature, in the sense the ecosystem of the natural world is necessary, and persons with disabilities could also help with this. Number 16, peace, justice, and strong institutions. Definitely, we have issues with like in courts of justice, whether a deaf lawyer could actually practice law. There's some issues. There was an interesting article on a deaf lawyer in India was assisted by the Chief Justice in India so that she could practice in the court of law. Yeah. So, and that helps in terms of the practices of it, and also in terms of people who have to go to courts, and that is a physical thing, the court or the police station or places where you need to seek for justice, and also accessibility to because there are a lot of poor people who can't afford, and many of them are also disabled persons. So who can't afford to have access to representation in a court of law. Number 17, partnerships for the goals. So definitely stakeholders are also including persons with disabilities and older persons in a country. And you can't really leave anyone behind. So I would like to leave this podcast with the phrase, nothing about us without us. So include persons with disabilities in the mainstreaming development for the Sustainability Development Goals 2030. Thank you.